Hello everyone! The Tumbril Q&A has been released, and once again I've taken it upon myself to go through it and reduce these items down into a series of single declarative statements about the Ranger. And by popular request, I'm going to be adding in some of my own opinions about this at the end of the video. So let's go down the list item by item. Wheeled vehicles like the Ranger will by default have a lower signature than the Gravlev bikes, like the X1, Dragonfly, and the Nox are going to have. The Rangers are also going to be generally more compact than the Gravlev bikes. This is going to allow it to fit into smaller spaces and to be able to avoid certain environmental hazards that would normally affect a hover bike. And they mentioned that the Ranger can even fit into an Argo MPUV. The general rule of thumb is going to be if a Grey Cat can fit into it, then a Ranger is going to be able to as well. Based on this description, I have to assume that the ship matrix info about the Ranger's size is completely wrong, but they didn't clarify by how much or go into any more specific details about this. Down the road, the cargo vest that's being bundled along with the CV will have some functionality to it, and will be able to expand out the player's personal inventory. By how much and to what extent is a complete unknown at this time. The 1.2 SCU's cargo space that was listed for the CV is incorrect. The final concept is capable of only carrying 0.375 SCUs or 0.125 mission boxes. If they're going to allow the player to be able to shoot while riding a Ranger, then it's going to require a lot more animation overhead for this vehicle than it currently has, since you still need to be able to independently keep control of the bike with one hand while you're firing with the other. So they're not committing to this feature one way or another at this time. It seems like something that they want to do, but only if the animation budget allows for it, and they end up having enough time to invest in doing the extra work that's required to make this happen. If you manage to knock the Ranger down, you are going to be able to put the bike back up onto its wheels in a way that mirrors the self-righting function of the Gravlev bikes. All of the Rangers use a vehicle-sized power plant that consumes fuel, and the RC model has a second power plant that's going to provide it with additional power. They mentioned that it can also end up using a battery, which will provide an alternative time-limited power source that's going to have a lower signature emission. The cargo rack that's found on the CV is bespoke to that bike and is not going to be able to be placed on any of the other Rangers. The exact speed of the Ranger wasn't given, but it's described as being faster than any of the other current wheeled vehicles' top speed, which is currently around 45 meters a second, but not as fast as the Gravlev vehicles, which are currently being clocked at around 60 meters per second. In addition to that, the Rangers are also going to be able to accelerate better on certain surfaces than other wheeled vehicles can. The TR is going to have two size 1 guns that are fitted into bespoke mounts that allows the guns to have a limited amount of gimbaling when it comes to their firing arc. The Ranger has a steering angle of plus and minus 15 degrees within its fork, and this may be further adjusted during the production phase of its development if this ends up not being enough. Well, that's going to be it for the information that was provided during the Q&A, but there still are a number of things that I wanted to see answered that unfortunately did not get addressed. For instance, I was really curious to find out what the range of the RC and TR Rangers were, especially when compared to something like the Rover or the Cyclone. They did end up giving some more information about the size of the vehicle, but unfortunately it was more of a vague general description of what they would like it to be, rather than any specific information on what it is. And when it comes to racing, I'd like to have heard more about how the Ranger RC compares to the Cyclone RC. They've already talked about the Ranger having a faster top speed and acceleration rate, so what are the advantages to using the RC Cyclone? And both the Cyclone and the Ranger have a unique tire design that can be deployed to improve its grip, but there's still no word on when they plan on implementing this part of the bike's functionality. I was also wondering if we were going to be able to wear heavy armor while riding a bike. There's no reason why you shouldn't, but still, I'd like to hear things like that being confirmed by someone who's in a position to make those decisions a reality. They did confirm that the RC has a second power plant, as one of the devs had originally described it to have. And I have some final thoughts about each one of these vehicles that I'm going to share with you now. I'm going to start off with the CV, which at first was the bike that I was least interested in, but now I'm going to go 180 in the other direction when it comes to it. First off, I think that this would be a great vehicle for solo travelers. Having double the operating range of the other bikes is going to be extremely useful no matter how far that range ends up being. And once the physicalized inventory system gets fully added into the game, storage space is going to become one of the biggest hurdles for a player to have to overcome. The days of having magic pockets will soon come to an end, and once it does, everything is going to have to fit somewhere on your person. And although the amount of space they describe the CV as having isn't that game impacting, every little bit is still going to count. Even if that means more room for O2 canisters, an extra clip of ammo, or even having a spare med pin or two. Having access to any one of these items could mean the difference between a narrow escape and waking up in a hospital. Or for some of you, a prison. That's going to be it for my thoughts on the CV, so let's move on and talk about the TR next. The TR seems to have the best mix of offensive and defensive capabilities. Having the low signature that's inherent to all the Rangers is going to make it hard to detect, and having the ability to return fire on your enemies always seems to work for me. A lot of the gameplay mechanics that surrounds these bikes are still being worked out, but regardless of what they eventually come up with, you can end up going wrong with the decision to add some guns onto your bike. And I'm thinking that a pair of repeaters are going to complement the playstyle of this vehicle rather nicely. Although 2 size 1 weapons aren't going to win any wars for you, it is going to be able to do some damage to any ground soldiers, even ones that are wearing heavy armor, and to any nasty creatures that are added later on into the game. The weapon's semi-gimbling is going to act just like it does for the current Gravlev bikes, so you can use them as an example to go by when imagining how the TR would handle using boom and zoom tactics to take out soldiers as you pass through an enemy compound. And that leaves me with the RC. The RC Ranger, at least on paper, seems to have every advantage over the RC Cyclone, with the only exception being that the Ranger doesn't have shields. But with regards to pure racing mechanics, the Ranger can fit between narrower spaces, it accelerates faster, has a higher top speed, it can also boost as well. Plus it has the extra advantage of being able to recover quickly if it ends up getting knocked over. And as a final nail in the coffin, you can pop a wheelie as you cross the finish line and win like a boss. So I'm curious to hear more about any ideas they have for balancing these two racers. And regardless of what your opinions of the Ranger may be, the RC and the CV are still going to be some very inexpensive LTI tokens that can be used to bestow lifetime insurance on pretty much almost anything, other than the Archimedes or the Merlin. So that's some of my opinions on the Ranger series. And just as a final note, they've talked a lot in the past about how these environmental hazards are going to add more significance to ground vehicles, but they haven't gone into too many specifics on how this is going to be accomplished. During one of their gameplay demos, Akani was shown demonstrating how this effect could cause a ship to have to land, forcing them to go the rest of the way using a ground vehicle. I envision this happening in one of two ways. The first would be windstorms that were powerful enough to knock even a large ship around. This would cause them to have to veer off of their current flight path and find a more suitable place to land, and then continue the rest of the way on foot. But that scenario brings up a number of edge cases to have to contend with, and I don't know how good of a permanent solution that would end up being for this problem. Another idea would be to have a particular area start to emit a strong electromagnetic field that was powerful enough to cause your MFDs to display static. And if you continued along in your current path, this interference would eventually start to affect your ship's components as well. This would further disrupt its power systems, and if you remained in that area for any length of time, your engines would eventually start to fail. At first it would just be for a short period of time, but it should still be enough to make you want to get the hell out of that area. The second blackout would last a bit longer, while the third power outage could end up being fatal. The appearance of this electromagnetic field could be connected to specific missions, so it wouldn't have to be a permanent fixture that was tied into any one particular area. And with that thought, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.